Mary, can you tell me your SCA name so I can mark you as being attended for the class, please? Hi, Elidor.
Hello, I'm in my yoga clothes. I'm not turning the Zoom on.
Sorry, say that one more time.
I am in my yoga clothes, so I am not turning my Zoom on.
Oh, it's okay. The university organizers wanted us to be marking off attendance, so I'm going to try to do that as people join.
Good luck.
How's my volume, by the way?
Fine, but that's not something that you really have to worry about. Zoom and should take care of it, but you sound fine. I can hear you fine. Fantastic.
How are the other classes going? Have you taken any other ones?
Yes, and I also played hooky on or cheated on Atlantia and went to some Kaid classes today as well. And that happened.
I heard they were cross-scheduled. I was actually invited to teach at the Kaid one as well. And I'm like, oh, I'd love to. And I'm like, wait a second, that 13th rings a bell.
You could have just cross-posted.
Say it again?
Hold on, I'll put my video on so you can see me. So you could have just kind of cross-posted, right? You could have just said, here's where it's going to be, and then over in Kaid. So
yeah, I could have.
Alphamark is going to be having in July, like July 11th or something, the week after the 4th of July. So don't worry, I will make sure people know more about it.
I'll have to write that down.
All right.
All right. Let's see. All right, got more people. All right, hey, as people are joining, feel free to let me know what your SCA name is so I can mark you off as being attended, please.
I'm pretty sure mine matches my SCA name, I think.
So it might be different. So right now I don't see Molly on the University of Atlantia list. I've got a lot, but just speaking off of ones that I've got, is it Quenild or Ori or
yeah, I'm Ori. That's me.
That's you, Ori? Got
yeah,
it.
That's me. I think that's what my thing says too. I don't know. It just says me for me, so.
All right, got it. Do any of y'all know if a class, if there's a previous session that butts up to this one?
Yeah, so all the classes that are going on end right when the next class starts, but they try to end it 10 minutes early, so that way people can get into their next Zoom rooms.
Okay, I think this is the last session, so I'll still try to adhere to that, but we'll just I'll keep that in mind for people to come here. I might just start slowly so that anybody who's coming from the previous one into this one doesn't miss out on too much.
Oh, interesting. My video decided to die.
Sorry, who's that?
Hey, Julian, it's Edwin.
Hey, how you doing?
Pretty good. My video decided to die at the end of the day.
Oh, it's okay.
I didn't do it when I was teaching.
Oh, when you were teaching. Oh,
Yeah.
that's a shame.
No, it didn't do it, thankfully.
Let's see. I think I might get better mic reverb if I'm doing this. I'm doing this on my phone. I'm using my phone for the Zoom device, and I'm using my computer for my reference materials. It speaks to my computer though. My phone's better than it. All right, we'll give it just a few more minutes, and then we'll start jumping into class. But if anyone has any questions ahead of time, please let me know. I don't have multimedia that I'm going to be sharing through Zoom. I have a document that I'm going to send through the email list afterward to everybody. But I won't be. I don't have really. You're just going to see me for the actual Zoom meeting. Like I said, I don't have like a PowerPoint presentation or anything like that. So that's the general format. So you don't have to worry about that. You'll just have to see my ugly mug the whole time. All right. Lewitt, I've got you as attended. Let's see. If anyone, if their Zoom name doesn't match their SCA name, please let me know for attendees. Otherwise, we can talk about it afterward and I can mark you off. Yeah. All right, we'll start in 1 minute. Any last minute questions from the pre-class group? All right.
Microphone's now on. Yay. Okay.
Hey, thank you for bringing notes.
You.
Hey, Olivier, how you doing? What's up, Arik?
Hey.
All right. All right, it's 4:31 right now, so in respect for everyone's time, we'll get this started. Okay, so fighting feedback. This is for anybody, so it doesn't matter if you're fencing or if you're an armored fighter, if you're doing something completely different, or if you just want to learn about it as a non-fighter, that's fine too. Where I came into this topic came from an instructor intensive that I took at Academy Duello with Arik, and we learned a lot about feedback, and it really formalized a lot about the mistakes that happen in the feedback process. So just kind of leading off about it, one of the big, feedback a lot of times is regarded by people as being something that's a gift that they're giving people. And that really ignores the kind of the complicated dynamics that come from feedback and the harm that it can cause. So when it's done wrong. So let's start off with what can go wrong about feedback. So one of the big things is social damage. That feedback is, can lead to hurt feelings if it's done wrong. It can lead to, being perceived in wrong ways. It can lead to putting you in an emotional state that you don't want to be in. All sorts of issues. Feedback has social implications. It's true. So it's not something that is just given. All right. Another aspect is that it can provide bad information or unwanted information. That's, people come to this with goals a lot of the time. you have a goal about what you want. Maybe even you're not formalizing it, but you have it at least in your head. So with that context in mind, what is feedback? Feedback ultimately is data and analysis that is asked for and received. And what it does is it informs skill progression. So ultimately the process of feedback is you go from data to analysis. Usually in a good feedback scenario, it's a multi-party analysis, and then that leads to skills progression. So with all that in mind, really the meat of what I think I have to offer in this, as far as talking about feedback, is the etiquette of feedback. And there might be some groans from people about it, but etiquette's extremely important with feedback. So the big phrase I'd like to start this off with is that unsolicited help isn't help, it's harm. And where that comes into play is that one of the things that really is at the heart of the feedback process is consent. Everything starts with mutual consent in the feedback process. Feedback has to be wanted, and the person whose feedback is being solicited has to want to give it. It is a mutual multi-party consent process. So everything starts with mutual consent. Everything starts with someone either asking for feedback or someone saying, would you like feedback? And then the other party affirming it. So so one thing that a lot of people, a term that has come into the popular discourse these days is the term mansplaining. And there's a lot of cultural implications with that term. People might like it, they might not like it. Any baggage that people have with that term aside, it comes from a place of sincerity where people are, it's about, it's giving someone something that they don't necessarily want. It can be condescending. It can totally ignore someone's context. And basically, when you give someone unsolicited feedback, or you give them maybe misdirected feedback that doesn't have that continual consent process of feedback, you're basically mansplaining to them. And that can cause someone real harm. It can make someone decide, hey, because you're there in that place with them at that practice, they might decide, hey, I don't want to deal with that person anymore. And they could leave our hobby because of it. So one thing that my instructor uses for that, Gary, he says that it's about creating a safe space for this environment, for the passes in a fighting context of what's going on. So and that's both physical and mentally and emotionally. So, and that also goes back to consent. So there's really two words that I'm probably going to repeat throughout this, and one is trust, and the other one is about empowerment. So what feedback should be doing, it's based on trust, and it's about empowering someone's self-progression, because we're not, even though we're recreating, this is the new Middle Ages, it's not, this isn't something where you have a formal apprenticeship where someone is basically a slave to that person. That's not how skills progression works within our context, within the society of amateurs. So ultimately what we want the feedback process to do is to empower someone's skills progression that they are doing on their own. This is about it's about empowering someone's self progression. And if the feedback that is being given doesn't do that, then there's a problem with that feedback. So trust and empowerment and creating that safe space. There's two more things I want to talk about with the etiquette of feedback. The first one is privacy. So one thing, people have degrees of kind of their, how comfortable they are in social situations. And it becomes way more intense when when you are being judged and you're putting yourself on the line, and fighting is an emotional event and it's performance oriented. There's so much more baggage to the social interaction of fighting that is involved in the feedback process. And I don't actually want to use the term fighting too much. So I'm going to use passes, because ultimately the person that you're doing this feedback with is a partner. This is a partnership for this. There shouldn't be enmity, at least for a feedback-based fight. So feedback-based passes. So privacy comes into play. Laying the groundwork for everything should include a discussion of privacy, where you say, hey, I would, as someone who is potentially being asked for feedback, I would say, hey, would you like to do this right here? Are you comfortable with this person as a marshal, or would you rather have someone else? Would you rather this be in a more private environment? There's the privacy of the situation is also part of the etiquette of feedback. It goes back into the safe space concept. Finally, let's see. Feedback happens best when someone is asking for feedback. It happens best pre-exchange, on both sides. So, you're creating a scenario for this situation where, if I'm having an exchange with someone and then they ask me afterward whether, hey, can I have some feedback on that? It's a lot harder for me to give them that, because maybe I was thinking that, hey, I'm working with my own context in that situation. I'm working with, hey, maybe I'm working on my own skills progression about a specific tone where I'm like, hey, I really want to simulate what my next exchange in a tournament is going to be like with that person, instead of being in a mode where I'm observing and I'm looking for things. So it really best happens ahead of time. So basically, there's three reasons. One is that it prepares you to be your partner to be an observer and not just a fencer. Because there are many different ways, or a fighter. There's so many different ways of going. There's different speeds, different levels of observation, and so it lays that groundwork. It provides context. So you work, and we'll talk about this in a second about kind of the pre-exchange kind of responsibilities. But it provides context. It gives you a launching point for that. Let's see, and it tells you what kind of exchange it's going to be. So whether it's competitive evaluation, or even if we're looking for something that's really a low speed, low guided, kind of impromptu teaching in the middle of all of it. Let's see. All right. Any questions on the etiquette side of things from anybody in the group? Okay. All right. Just a couple quick things. So like I said, we went over empowerment. We went over how also potentially giving unsolicited, when it comes to unsolicited feedback, there's the aspect that you could be giving them something that they're not working on, and it can distract from what they're doing. So if someone's working on, their point control, or they're working on their intensity, or they're just working on their gas tank, their headspace, or any number of things, if you tell them to, that if you distract from that point, it could give them stuff that they don't want. All right. So let's start talking about the actual responsibilities of the different parties during all this. So and I'm going to start with the pre-exchange, during the exchange, and the post-exchange for the person who's asking for the feedback. And then we'll go into all of those for the person who is giving that feedback. So so ahead of time, the person who's soliciting the feedback sets the stage. Okay. And once again, this begins with consent. It begins with asking for the feedback. So this is for instance, would be that I would be at an event, and I'd come up to someone else. I'd say, hey, I'm interested in having some passes where you could give me some feedback about it. And would you be okay with doing that? So, would you like some coffee? Then you say, or would you like some tea? And being amenable to the person who you're asking, saying no. Not everybody is in a state of mind where they want feedback, and not everyone is in a state of mind where they're, either their headspace or their health, where they're able to really give good feedback. And it's okay for either party to say no. All right. The next part is deciding if you want specific or general feedback. A lot, maybe I don't know what someone's going to be good at, what they might, be especially good at giving feedback on. And I might just come into something where, hey, I'd like someone to be generally observant of what we're doing, and to have a little discussion afterward about what they saw. So that would be a general feedback conversation. Or I could say, hey, I'm working on my disengages. That's something I'm working on, and I'd like you to keep an eye on those and let me know what you think about them. Which ties into the next aspect of whether you are okay with whether you want to effectively hold all questions to the end, or whether it's okay to pause your exchange at any point in time for these observations to happen kind of on the spot, or maybe even for there to be a little bit of instruction including with that. So laying the groundwork for that as far as specifics. Agreeing on the format. We talked about that. We'll talk about video a little bit more in detail at the end, but once again, if you're setting up video for this, I love to video my fights, my exchanges, but with video, you need to ask, hey, is it okay if we video this? And that sometimes includes bystanders as well, which goes into privacy. So if you're gonna take video, ask for video. Say, hey, is it okay if I take video? And be prepared to discuss the distribution of that video after that. Whether hey, this will just be for my personal review, or I have a shared drive that includes this mod and that mod and this instructor on here. Would you like me to create a private file for that? That sort of thing. All right. The last thing I'm going to say about the pre-exchange is once again be able to say no, be willing to take no as an answer for that. All right. So during the exchange, for the person who's asking for feedback, you want to follow through with that. asterisk. Until the groundwork that you've laid is renegotiated, you should be basically in a state of mind where you're providing that kind of exchange that we talked about earlier. So if I say I want to work on my disengages and I don't give them disengages, then it'll probably become it'll be probably a pretty frustrating situation. So basically give the exchange that you agree on. That being said, stop if there's a problem. If there's a problem, if you're not in a state of mind to do it anymore, you should always be able to stop. You should always be able to, and you should always be willing to potentially to change that. So, let's say I say I want to work on my lunges for 10 passes, and then 3 passes in, I have zero energy, and I notice that I'm really screwing up my point control. Then be able to say, hey, can we work on something else instead, and being able to do that. So maintaining that dialogue with your partner. All right. So finally, in the post exchange, you want to catch your breath. You want to be able to, you want to take notes. So one thing that this goes back to the introduction of what feedback is it's forming data. And if you aren't recording data, then it's going to be way harder to inform that skills progression later on, to turn data into analysis and to turn analysis into skills progression. So data can happen. Video is an easy way of collecting data, but taking notes, I would say video and notes is really like kind of an optimized way of doing it, but definitely take notes if you can. And then there's potentially creating a follow-up plan, but we'll talk about that later on in this. So any questions for the person who's soliciting feedback? Any observations? Doesn't need to be just questions.
I have a question that's not explicitly, I guess, related to that particular portion of the exchange, but my question is that I've heard different competing opinions on where exactly the person who's in the teacher role should set their like the amount of challenge that they're offering the person who is taking the role of the student. I've heard some teachers claim that you should reward the student when they're doing the behavior that they're trying to work on correctly with a touch on you. I've heard other teachers say that being too compliant a partner when you're doing passes for the purposes of feedback can create like false positives or kind of like an unrealistic model. And so I guess I want to ask, where do you see that line of creating a challenging environment for the student while still allowing them to feel like constructive reward when they've completed a skill successfully?
Okay, those are both really good questions, and I really can't say 100% yes or no to either because it can work differently for different people. But I do have a few thoughts specific on that. So you were talking about when you see what you think is the correct thing that they're trying to achieve, to reward that. If you have an ongoing exchange with that person, you know that actually is what they want, then maybe that's something that should be that can happen. But once again, it comes into the idea of the goal of feedback is not to correct someone, because your context is different from somebody else's. I'm 5'8" and like 160 pounds. Maybe someone who's built giant will have different things, and maybe something that works for me in my ideal circumstance isn't going to work for So ultimately, it's about empowering that person. So even though you might think it's correct on the spot, it might not really be. It might not really be. It might lead to that false positive that you mentioned later on, where it's really ultimately the person who is receiving that feedback, the person who's trying to get that feedback. At the end of the day, I don't want to sound wishy-washy, but like I said, it's about empowerment. It's about empowerment, and it's about them knowing when they've got it right. It's not about the person who's giving feedback to really tell them what is right or wrong. And you mentioned the term teacher, and that's not wrong. It's not. Someone might actually have a formal role of a teacher, but I prefer to use the term partner in the
Sure.
in the feedback process, because and this is something that we'll talk about a little bit more in the conclusion, where it's about dialogue. I have my goals, and that person has their goals, and I'm trying to empower that person to give them data and give my vectors of analysis for that. But I think over structuring during the exchanges can have more dangers than is often understood, where because you might not know everything that they're trying to do. And so I'd say providing like a representative fight to them and is kind of what you're going for instead. So yeah, I'm sorry if I danced around that a little bit. Okay.
No, that answers my question.
All right,
perfect.
All
So
right,
let's talk.
Can I ask
with
a
that
question?
being said, let's talk a little bit more about. Oh, Arik, did you have something to say?
Yeah. So you're talking about establishing consent to give feedback.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about, especially with a new, to stick within your terminology, not a new student, but a new partner, someone you're not used to, establishing consent to give physical corrections.
Yeah, no, that's actually a huge one. So thanks for bringing that up, because touching has a lot of boundaries associated with it. So asking someone about whether you do not put your hands on someone without asking them, saying, hey, I think I can show you, ideally you probably want to try to show them first, but if you could say, hey, is it okay with you if I adjust your hand, but sorry, someone was saying something else?
Sorry.
No, go ahead, Eleodor. Were you going to say something?
Nope, it was an accident. My bad.
Okay. So yeah, no, great point, Arik, about consent, about touching as well, because that can be a something that's there's a lot of baggage with that. So always establish the consent for touching someone if you're going to adjust them, and that's something that they have the right to say no as well at any point in time as well. It's like, hey, I'm not really comfortable with this anymore, and that's fine. All right,
Julian?
Yeah.
Back on Michael's thing about, give the person a touch. I think it depends on the relationship of the partners. Like, to use a couple of people that you and I both know well, if I suddenly start getting a bunch of touches on Jeff and Gary,
yeah,
I know they're giving them to me, because I can occasionally touch Jeff and not a snowball's chance on Gary. And if Gary starts giving me a bunch of touches in a row, that's not doing me any good.
Yeah.
So, what's the relationship between the partners? And, because obviously if you're asking for feedback, you're going to want to go to somebody that you respect.
It can be, yeah.
Hopefully. Or
well, yes,
somebody different, but if it's somebody that is a lot better than you, and they're suddenly giving you stuff, how much is that really teaching you?
Yes.
I'd rather be told, hey, this looks pretty good, but then show me what they're doing to still defeat what I'm doing that they say is pretty good, so I can learn to fight even better.
And I like that last sentence where it's about you learning to fight better. It's not about me teaching. It's not about me, making you fight better. This is about you learning. This is about your self progression, and me helping helping you, based on your wanting me to do that. All right. So, giving feedback. So in the pre-exchange, so once again, there's the establishing of consent, asking them if they want feedback on general things or specifics. We talked about that, and the format. So agreeing for stops on the spot. So basically, a lot of the same stuff that we talked about just earlier, but one thing that's very important that is also neglected a lot of the time for people who are being asked feedback is also being comfortable to say no as that. Just because, like, for instance, for someone, maybe they're a mod, and being able to say, and they might feel a responsibility where, oh, I guess I just don't get to say no to people anymore. No, you don't. That's not true. I don't care what award you have. I don't care, whether you are the best fencer in the world. You have the right to say no for being told, being asked for feedback at any point in time as well. You might be gassed. You might have nothing left in your tank. You might be injured. You might not be in a good headspace. Everyone has their own context. So being able to, if you are being asked for feedback, please feel the that you can say, hey, I'm sorry, but I'm just not in the right place to be able to do that. Let's take a rain check and maybe next time. All right. So during the exchanges, big thing, look for what they're asking for. It goes back to the same thing about them giving you the kind of the specifics that they're looking for feedback on. The same thing is that you should be looking for them. You should be looking for those things. And Michael, when you were talking about the it's not just about giving them, like, how to put it, you can facilitate those scenarios happening without micromanaging them, and there's a balance to that. I can't tell you over Zoom exactly how it's going to work, because it is based on relationships, and it could be it's changing. So, but facilitating those scenarios to happen can be part of it. If they're looking to work on leverage, and they're looking to work on disengages, if I fight gunslinger for the whole fight, I'm kind of not really giving them I'm probably not doing a really good job of creating situations where they can get feedback on that. So look for it, facilitate scenarios of it happening. But if they say, hey, I want to get your best game out of you 100% all the time, then there might be a situation where you say, hey, time out, as someone who's giving feedback, and you can say, the things that you want to work on and the terms that we discussed aren't really going to create a situation where I'm able to give you the kind of feedback you want. I mentioned gunslinger earlier. Like, if I'm fighting with, if I approach Torah and I say, hey, I want to work on rapier leverage with you, it's probably not, but I want you to give me your competitive game. That's not really what I'm creating a situation that's probably not going to happen, because that's not really part of how his best game happens. So, but then it would be part of his due diligence if he says yes to say, hey, Julian, that's, I'm not sure if that's going to happen. Can we maybe adjust how, that? Or maybe you want to do, if you want to do leverage stuff with me, maybe we should do drills instead of free play. All right. So, and then like I said, being able to pause it can be part of the terms that you establish. All right. And then at the end of it, like I said, catching your breath. So sometimes people need time to process what they've seen. And then we go to the follow-up of, once again, I think I mentioned this earlier, where it's about feedback is not a lecture. It's not the feedback. It's not the person who's giving feedback. It's almost, and it's not really giving. It's an exchange and a discourse. Feedback. A healthy feedback process should be a conversation, not a lecture. And then if you're giving feedback, this is where the term where fencing language comes in, and this is where I know we've talked about this, where one of the real great things about from a fencer's perspective is, and I know that in the armored side, Bellatrix really has gone a long way toward developing this for the armored side, is fencing is that fighting language, a common language, allows you to convey things in an efficient way that can be understood by both parties. So, when I talk to someone and I say first intention or second intention, or, you're in terza or you're in quarta, when you're doing this and they don't know what the heck I'm talking about, or with you guys, when I'm saying, when I say gunslinger and people don't know what the heck I'm talking about, then that establishes barriers to communication. It's a process of communication. So it definitely helps if you can use common language in the follow-up process. All right. So before we get into follow-ups and more discussion of the post exchange, is there anybody want to add anything or any questions in the meantime? All right. So let's talk about video review real quick. So like I said, video can be a really powerful tool, but there's some considerations about it. So one thing we talked about consent to video review, and then distribution of it. So before you video anything, there should be consent of the parties that are being videoed, and there should be a discussion of where that video is going to go. Whether that's going to be something that's just for that you share with each other, whether it's just for the person who's taking its personal use, whether they want to share it with their teachers. The distribution and the privacy of the video should be established ahead of time. Next, let's see. Video gives data. Once again, we're talking about data analysis skill, and then training to skills progression. Video gives raw data, but a video of one of my exchanges that is just sitting there on my drive that I've never looked at afterward doesn't really do me anything. It's there, and maybe later on I can look at it. But when you take video, you should have it's a really good idea, at least to make the best use of it. You should review it later on. You should review it, and then potentially with your teachers. That's one of the real great things about it too, about putting it in a common location, is that for someone who has students or is a student, you can maybe have a regular review process of the videos that you upload to your to a common location. So having that analysis, taking the video is one part. You've gathered the data. The next part is analyzing that data, and that can be, and that's part of that follow-up process. So videos data, analyze it. It would be best to analyze it if you're going to actually do it, because that's making the best use of it. All right. Just a couple suggestions with taking video that maybe some of you can add to this. I've found I like to use my Google Drive, a folder on my Google Drive for videos. Videos take up a lot of space, and the higher quality video you can take, the better, because when we're talking about the milliseconds and the small movements that happen in fencing and in armored combat, it's the higher quality video you can catch up on those small movements. So along with that, they're going to take up space. So using like a larger cloud based application is best. Like I said, I use Google Drive. It might not be the best one. I didn't really shop around for it. I just upgrade the memory on it and share it with people. Another thing to keep in mind is when you share it over other applications, there might be a compression that a file compression that happens in it. So like if I'm sharing it over like Facebook Messenger, which I like to do, Facebook Messenger compresses videos, so a lot of those small movements are lost when people are videoing it over that. So keep in mind when you're sharing videos, really try to keep in mind that there might be compression that happens across applications that might make it harder to take a look at those things. Any best practices or thoughts on video review from anybody? Yep.
From a girl's point of view, most of those that I've trained or worked with, they don't have the vocabulary to look at a video and see what's going on. Most of them don't have the training that guys do. So you have to sit down with them and establish like what a shot looks like when they throw it, that sort of thing, before you can even give feedback on their fights. What, in your estimation, is the best way to go about that?
I think
I don't want to be condescending.
No, it's okay. I like to be very specific about who I share videos with. It's like sometimes it can be fun to have like a wide distribution of the videos that you send, but if someone it's almost if you want some it's like how do I put this? If you're going to be doing it with the intent of feedback, it's really giving someone video involves a lot of the same stuff that we're talking about in the feedback process here, where sharing a video with someone who wouldn't be able to give you good feedback in an in-person fight. Sorry, go ahead.
Our local fighter practices video the practice. That's understood by everybody that's there. And those people that don't want to be on video, we don't put them on the videotaping field. But part of the practice is the follow-up to give them pointers on how to improve. We have a lower level to medium level fighter practice.
Yeah.
But the girls don't get a lot of the vocabulary or what they're looking at when they look at the videos. And I don't want to sound like a bitch or condescending, but there's a whole thing that has to be explained. And I don't know how to do that without sounding that way.
Yeah, so no, I actually misunderstood what you were talking about, so I apologize about that. I was thinking about one-on-one video review, and group video review is a totally different thing. And you're absolutely right that's almost more of a presentation than it is a feedback process, than it is like a one-on-one feedback process. And that's actually something that I'm really not probably discussing all that much during the course of this video, because most of what I'm talking about in this is about one-on-one. But as far as group dynamics, I would say that one thing that maybe you can do to help show people is provide like captions or a textual analysis of what to look ahead of time to help kind of maybe guide that, where I think there, and video editing software can be helpful with that, where you can pause or slow down an exchange and try to use more common terms, where you say, hey, their blade moves under their opponent's blade and goes to the other side. That's I just described a disengage, but I can use, but I would say your best ally, your best tool in that is composing your thoughts and preparing it ahead of time to use it in a common language, and maybe writing it down. Because if you're just going to do it on the spot, you're going to revert to the vocabulary that you know, and that could be, so doing it on the fly is going to be hard. So does that kind of answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. All right. So when we're talking about the analysis and then going into skills progression, there's developing a training plan. And this is something that also involves a level of trust and consent that comes in this. So someone who I'm getting feedback from isn't necessarily going to be someone that I want to have develop a training plan. I just want them to give me some data. But that could be part of that feedback process where that person is a partner with me in developing a follow-up training plan. And this is where the expansive concept of drills, building drills, and creating goals comes into play. And I'm sure Dante talked all about that during his class here at university. So I'm not going to step on his toes that much. But like I said, feedback, thinking about it as far as data to analysis to training for skills progression that's the way that I look at it. It's a way, and developing that follow-up training plan is something that can be part of on the spot as you see things, keeping in mind drills that can happen that you can use afterward. And part of what I have on my form, on kind of the example form that I have for feedback that I've built, is after you saw something, explaining how it affects the exchange, and then suggestions to improve it, and then training or resources to work on that. So a training plan can be part of it. It doesn't need to be, though. It can, like I said, someone could just be wanting some a vector of analysis and or just raw data, and that's fine. But that should be part of the format. All right. Following up. So one thing that I really like about so our goal is a typical goal, not everybody's goal, but if your goal is skills progression, collecting your historical data can really inform that in a big way. I can't tell you how many times I've looked back at my notes. I've been thinking that I'm plateauing in my fencing. I'm like, oh man, I'm getting down on myself. And then I look back on my notes and I'm like, wow, I learned all these different things from all these different people, and it jogs my memory and it gets me into a place where it I can find where I was at before. It's almost like in computer terms, saving, saving your state at a point in time. So here, Michael, you said something. Let me find the chat. All right, so Michael said, are there kinds of feedback that you think are more or less appropriate for on the spot at the event feedback versus someone you work with more regularly or at a practice? Topics or technical details that are more important in one scenario than another? Yes. All right. Good question. All right. So on the spot, I would say on the spot, there are, it ties into something that we talked about, that the topic earlier about that there's the danger of maybe zooming in too far or creating your own version of what is right and what is wrong. But I would say on the spot is one thing that I really like to do with my student is after an exchange that I maybe like raise my eyebrow about, where I'm like, I ask him, I pause the exchange and I ask him, what were you trying to achieve there? And that's that. And then I use that question to guide that follow-up. And so and once again, it puts the ball in his court, because if maybe maybe what I think was wrong about that is totally different about what he thought was wrong about that. Or maybe he was, I think I really like using that question, what were you trying to achieve in that, to have, once again, that dialogue. It's not about me telling him that, hey, that was wrong. It's about, asking him, hey, is that how you wanted that to go? And letting him dictate, the person who's asking for that feedback, letting him dictate where kind of guide, I wouldn't say dictate, letting him guide where that conversation goes. And he says, oh, I was trying to make this disengage at you, from your inside to your outside, and then draw an over parry, and then dig low at your thigh. I could say, all right, well, your commitment to that disengage wasn't convincing enough for me to go over there, and that can be a more satisfying follow-up than where I can say, hey, you're stepping wrong, and that's not at all what he was looking for. All right, so let's see. So that kind of goes into both of those. I would say, like I said, I really like the phrase, is that, what were you trying to achieve? What were you trying to accomplish in that exchange? And being someone who's giving feedback can be, you have your idea about what you were looking at and what you think happened, but letting them lead that conversation is important. All right.
So I have a question, if I can, before we move on.
Oh, no, go ahead. Sorry.
So I wandered in here as a newbie heavy fighter, so this has been interesting. I wonder, from the student perspective, and especially being a woman, I get a lot of feedback at practice, to the tune of like 10 comments a night. And it's of varying quality. So yeah. Do you have any advice on what I should be looking for to take away from that feedback?
So it's really good that you bring that up. And that's something that it's become a pretty popular there's a lot of important people in the fencing community who've been talking about that, especially in the context of male and female exchanges. And like what I was saying earlier on about like mansplaining, I know that it's a lot of times it comes into where there's the assumption that, I'm better than you, and you should be listening to everything that I'm telling you. I think that I don't want to like put the emphasis on you, because it really shouldn't be. But one thing that maybe you could do is, so you're getting like 10 different things of advice. That's probably way too much for you, right? Yeah. So do you take notes?
No, but I should. You're right.
Okay. So that would be, so aside from the social baggage that is very much there with that, probably, and I don't want to throw accusations at people, but there might be it might be perfectly well intentioned, but aside from the social baggage of it, just taking those notes will help you gather that, because you can't keep it. No one can keep 10 feedback, 10 sources of feedback in one night, unless you got like photographic memory. And so taking notes would probably be the first thing that I would say. But another thing is on the etiquette side, maybe trying to have a tactful conversation where you say, hey, can we have a more directed feedback conversation, rather than being on the spot, and I really don't want to get I would please not like to get feedback unless I'm asking for it.
Right. And thank you for that. I think one of the things I'd like to do is say, hold that for next time. That's more than I can absorb at this moment. Let's revisit that next week.
Yes, absolutely. And so many people don't understand how they drive people away, from their school, from their hobby, by overwhelming people or condescending to them. And so, there's a lot of strong personalities in the SCA, especially in fighting. But maybe, and there might be other people who you respect, who maybe they don't see as like a newbie, who you can maybe work with, for them to say, hey, I need you to kind of slow down a little bit with this person, let them. So fortunately, we do have a lot of people who could potentially, maybe if you're not comfortable saying, hey, I need you to slow down, having someone, a mutual friend who they can guide to that.
You're right.
It's not
I
perfect.
should set better boundaries around that. Yep,
yeah, but totally. Setting boundaries is so important, and a lot of people don't. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't. They don't respect boundaries until someone draws a line in the sand about it. Until they're told that they exist. So let me look back at the chat. All right. So Michael. Let's see, or / Ishmael. All right. Yeah, I would say that a lot of times, especially the teacher-student relationship can be pretty complicated. So that's something that you should develop with that person. But also being one thing that's important for my student relationship is establishing that the terms of it can change at any point in time. So being willing where they feel comfortable, where the student or the teacher is comfortable to be able to say, hey, I'd like to be working towards something different now, and being able to have a dialogue about how you want that feedback process to happen. All right. So let's see, we're coming up in the final minutes of all this, and I want to allow for more questions as people say, but let's see. I would say that really closing with some final themes is that good feedback doesn't come from, good feedback comes from a position of trust and empowerment. It's about empowering that person. It's not about the person that's giving the feedback. It's about the person that's receiving that feedback and empowering their progression and their goals. Maybe it's not even about progression for that person. Maybe that person just wants to have a good time, and that's fine. So it's feedback should start with consent, and and really focus on that person's goals, the person who's asking for feedback's goals. So, and it's about empowering them to develop themselves. Like I said, active consent and continuous consent, being able to, both parties being able to say no and establish terms at any point in time. Let's see. And then, yeah, ultimately it's about those things. And I would encourage people to, there's a few different sources that I really recommend people use. Academy Duello has a great blog, and I've shamelessly borrowed, borrowed a lot of these concepts from them. So Academy Duello, ACADEMIE Duello, DUELLO, and .com, and there's a blog on that, and if you search that blog, there's a ton that you can do. Just for people who maybe aren't as computer literate, you can use Google terms to do that, where site colon, and then you have the URL, and then you search terms. You don't need to use the actual host site's search function. But they talk a lot about it. I know that what is it? Especially when it comes to women and this process, who I know it disproportionately, a lot of times the feedback process harms. There's a great book out there by Iliador. I know you read this. I haven't read it yet. I know a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about is covered in it. It's by Katya at Valkyrie. Yeah, Fear is the Mind Killer. It's called Fear is the Mind Killer, and that talks. I recommend that to any especially to female practitioners and for teachers who are. And it's not just for females, but especially covers a lot of those challenges. I know it's really changed a lot of people. So if you look at the comment, if you look at the chat, it's in there, and I know that one of those questions earlier, I'm sure she has way more advice in that book, and even if you contact her about how we approach those sort of dynamics. So yeah, that's it's 5:30 right now. I don't believe there's a session after this. So if you want to ask questions, I'm available for the next 10-15 minutes. Otherwise, let's see. If you can leave on the chat that you attended, I would appreciate it. I think I might be able to find that on Zoom anyway, but especially if your name doesn't match if your Zoom name doesn't match your SCA name, I would appreciate that, so I can correctly mark everybody on this. But I'm going to send a follow-up, the document that I created to kind of help people facilitate feedback. It's basically a feedback form that you can bring with you to events, and it guides and formalizes this process, but feel free to change it. This is just like a piece of putty that I kind of made to look like a dragon. If you want to make it look like a stegosaurus, then go for it. So anyway, any questions either on the chat or by text, chat or by voice? Any observations?
I wanted to thank you for the clarity that you put into this presentation. All of the ideas that you presented were really easy to understand, and it was really easy for me to kind of immediately think of how else I can use these ideas, even outside of fighting, in terms of consent, setting expectations, making sure that everyone is on the same page. Just very valuable information, and it was very clear the way that you showed it. Thank you.
Well, hey, thanks for coming. I really appreciate it. And like I said, you can always follow up with me. I'm on Facebook on the name of this class, and I've got And like I said, I'm going to send an email afterward to everybody, and hopefully it'll include my email in it as well. But I will anyway. I'll include my email in the text.
Okay.
Thank you.
I just wanted to throw out as one more resource for armored fighters, if they're interested, you don't already know about it. Avery Alex, his medieval combat video review series on YouTube is amazing, where he does like play-by-play discussion of an explanation of a number of shots. So I know sometimes when I'm overwhelmed thinking of directions to take my fighting, I'll stop and watch a couple really great fights, think about what they're doing, and it always pays off. So if that's useful to anybody else, have at it.
Definitely, yeah. I actually knew Avery and Kaid. He's a good guy. He's a smart dude. All right. Anybody else? Any more stuff? All right. Well, thanks to everybody for attending, and I will mark everybody as having been here. So thank you again, and have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you very much.